Hey guys, I've just played a game against a player rated 1073 and I thought it would be interesting to replay the game and to look out for what the weaknesses tend to be for somebody rated in the 1000 to 1100 kind of bracket, so that if you're in that bracket, what do you need to be focusing on in order to improve your chess and break through that 1100 rating. So I was actually trying to get the England gambit because somebody had asked me in a comment to, how to respond to it if you're playing d4 and then black plays e5 in response. But we didn't go that way. We had d4, d5. So I decided to play the Queen's Gambit, c4. Now this is not normally something I normally play, but I like to mix things up a little bit. Okay, and now we have e6. So the first thing that I spot here is, yes, it's kind of a quiet move, all right? But one issue is it blocks in this bishop. This bishop now only has 2 squares it can occupy on the board. And another issue is that if I capture, then and black recaptures, it means then I have 2 central pawns and black only has 1 central pawn. I've still got my d pawn and my e pawn, and now he's traded off his e pawn for my c pawn, you see. So I'm trying to capture towards the center so that I can have more pawns in the center, which gives me more opportunity to push forward, break through, open up the center. Okay, so I mean, I wouldn't say this is necessarily breaking opening principles yet, but he's not done himself any favors by trying to get this bishop out. So alternative ideas, I think accepting the gambit is perfectly all right at this level, but he could also have maybe defended with c6. So then if I capture, he captures back with c6. And the thing about c6 is it's not preventing this bishop from coming out, it's not preventing this bishop from coming out, and if I recapture, he recaptures with the c pawn, and so far so good. So, but what we have e6, and then I take and he takes. So we're in a situation now, 2 against 1 central pawns. And I have the initiative, so I develop my knight to f3, developing my kingside minor pieces first where it's suitable. And now he brings his bishop out to e6, because this exchange has opened up that diagonal for his bishop. And this is okay. I mean, the thing is, it's adding a second defender to a pawn that is currently not attacked even once. And now I develop my dark squared bishop, so I'm now looking at this square that I see is only defended once. Might have ideas of maybe putting my queen on here and attacking that at some point. And he brings his knight out. So he's attacking this pawn, which currently has 2 defenders. But it's a reasonable developing move. And now I can play e3 because I've already got my dark squared bishop outside of this dark square pawn structure. I can now push e3, and this bishop is uninhibited. And knight to f6. So he's doing a decent job so far. In fact, he's arguably slightly ahead in development, having already developed 3 minor pieces to my 2. Okay, because I've spent a move recapturing on here already. So I bring out now my final bishop, which leaves this knight pinned. It's always nice just to, if you can just add a constraint for your opponent, then it'll make them think. Now, this is interesting because now what he does is he moves his light squared bishop back, which interestingly leaves this pawn now defended only once. It was defended 3 times. Okay, it did have knight, bishop, and queen all defending it. But this move, I mean, this does break opening principles because he's moving a developed piece again. Now, if he didn't do that, you always have to ask yourself, okay, the bishop's attacking my knight. Okay, fair enough. And that alone should not give you cause to panic or think that you have to react, okay? Because you have to think, okay, well, what happens if the bishop takes my knight? Okay, then I recapture with the b pawn here, and my king is still looking fairly secure. I've moved a pawn towards the center. I've opened up a semi-open file. This is not a bad situation for black. Okay, but that is a knee-jerk, I think, and this is something that players in this kind of bracket really need to start looking out for. Okay, so I developed my final minor piece with knight to c3. So now we've got one attacker, one defender against this pawn in the middle, and the pin on the knight is now broken, at least. Okay, now black now plays his knight into e4. Maybe he should have first thought about developing his final minor piece and getting his king castled, right? So this again is moving a developed piece a second time without a real reason to do it. Now, I'm not going to panic about this, because if he wants to capture my knight there, I'll recapture with a pawn, and I've moved another pawn towards the center. Okay, so I don't worry, I just castle. Right, so I'm practically completed development now. I might think about moving my queen up somewhere in order to connect my rooks, and then I'm done. Now, what do you think black does next? A pawn push, kicking the bishop, right? Now, this bishop is no threat right now. It's attacking a knight, but it can then be recaptured two ways. So again, you have to ask yourself, right, it's an attack, my piece is under attack, but how bad would it be if my opponent took? So what black's doing here is he's using a move, a precious move, in order to kick away a bishop that isn't really, I would say, a threat. Okay, and there's lots of other things he could have done with that move. I mean, I think particularly he should have developed his final minor piece on the king side so that he can castle. He could even arguably have developed his queen so that he might castle long. But anyway, he does this. I simply drop my bishop back. I'm almost inviting him to play b5 now. But he doesn't. He captures my knight, because what we realise is that this pawn is now, since this knight moved here, this pawn's actually undefended. And I did spot that. So possibly at this point, instead of castling, I could have simply grabbed the free pawn. Okay, but I didn't. I decided to castle. I want to follow opening principles. Okay, so kicks the bishop, and now we exchange knights, and he's taken away the attacker. He's removed the attacker of that pawn. So now what he does is he brings his knight back to e7. Now I can see what he's doing here. He has got a discovered attack against his bishop, but again, you have to remember the bishop is defended. So I don't have to react to this. If he wants to take my bishop, queen recaptures with check, and putting his knight here now has cut off the queen, and the dark squared bishop cannot come out into the board. The queen can only move sideways right now. So I think this was a poor move. But I do move my bishop back here just to address this pawn, and also to look through and beyond f7, because that could be a key square to attack later. Okay, I didn't have to do it, but I chose to do it. And now we have yet another move. So this bishop has moved now 1, 2, 3 times. Okay, and yeah, it's pinning my knight. So what that means is that my knight can't move because I lose my queen, but also my queen can't really move, because if bishop takes knight, my only way to recapture is g2 takes f3, and that would open up my king to potential trouble. So here, I think that kicking the bishop is the right thing to do. And the bishop retreats, and I double kick, because the bishop retreating there, the pin is still on, right? So I've still got the same problem. So double kick, g4. And now what I'm doing is I'm in a situation now where I've been forced to advance my pawns, so now I need to keep up that pressure and maybe try and make the best use of the space advantage that I'm winning on the king side. So the bishop has to retreat, obviously, and now I bring my knight into e5. So I am attacking the bishop, And right now, I think that capturing that bishop looks pretty tasty, because he's going to have to recapture with one of these pawns. And the role of these pawns at this point in the game is to protect His Majesty the King when he castles. Okay, if black has plans to castle. Now let's find out whether black gets the opportunity to castle. So now, guess what? This light squared bishop is zipping all over the board. Now, why he goes into e4, I guess the only answer is to avoid this capture. And it's not bad. I mean, it's not a bad outpost, but f3 could simply kick the bishop away, and I just play f3. So now my king is looking a bit naked down there in the corner, but on the plus side, my opponent is miles away from castling and finishing development. Right? The king is still stuck in the center of the board. That's very important. So I want to play in the center of the board. I want to open up the center. I want to take advantage of the fact that all my major pieces are on the back rank and free to move. So I could line these guys up against that king. Right? That is the problem. And this bishop has to move again, and it moves back to where it came from because it has no other squares. Couldn't go there, there because of the queen. Pawn's attacking there, pawn's attacking there. So he's only got one square, and now bang, knight captures. And we can recapture with a knight. It didn't have to be the pawn, and he goes ahead and does that. And now, because he's attacking my bishop, I simply drop my bishop back to h2. I could have put it on g3, but it's undefended on g3. Why not bring it all the way back to h2 where my king's defending it at the very least? And now we have queen out to g5. Now, again, he's failed to develop this final bishop that is just languishing there on the back rank, preventing black from castling on the king side. And the queen here just invites a gentle kick. This is quite a nice pawn structure now. I've got pawns defending these central pawns, and these two pawns, like we very often see in the center of the board, are covering all four of these squares. So queenie has got problems now. So the queen now moves back to e7. And now I centralize my rook, right? King and queen on the same file, put a rook on it. So now, for example, if knight takes pawn or anything like that, I recapture and win the queen. And now we have arguably an unnecessary pawn move, right? What black hasn't done is he's not doing anything with this guy. This bishop needs to be out there. Because not only is it stopping black from castling, but it's also, there's a good piece there, a powerful piece that is not in the game. It's a piece that's not attacking me. It's a piece that's not causing me any problems. You have to get your pieces out into the board before you start these tactical exchanges, if you can. So I don't worry about that. I grab the free pawn. It's been sitting there for a while. Queen moves across to harass the bishop. And here again, so what I'm doing here is I'm developing a piece, right? So the bishop's undefended. The queen's attacking the bishop. Fair enough. Now, a beginner would go, oh no, I've got to retreat my bishop, right? I'll just put it back on b3 or something like that, okay? What I do instead is I develop my queen, thereby connecting my rooks, which is something that I wanted to do anyway, and defend my bishop that way. What's more, look at this square here, right? I now have a barrage. I have two pieces lined up against b7, and it only has one defender in the form of the queen. So what I'm doing here is I'm just adding another little layer of threat or opportunity for me. Rook now comes across to d8. So you can see what black is thinking at this point, right? He's thinking, okay, I'm going to line up two attackers to a piece that's only got one defender. But he's missed something very important. And a key pattern to look out for, very high value pieces on the same diagonal. Okay. Now what I would love to do is play bishop c6 now, which would pin the queen against the king and win the queen. Right? I can't do that because this pawn on b7 is covering that square. So the next move, bishop takes b7. queen can't recapture because the bishop is protected by the queen, by my queen. And now finally, finally, the dark squared bishop decides to come off the back rank, get its act together. But as you can see, we've already mentioned it, it's too little too late, because the bishop just comes back to c6 and the queen is gone. Right? There's nothing that queen cannot legally move. The next move, it's going to be bishop takes queen. So my opponent now resigns at this point. So there you go. If you're rated around 1000 to 1100, these are the things that you need to be looking out for. Right? So what did my opponent do? What did my opponent fail to do? Okay. So moving your developed pieces too many times is a key one. Right? He missed this tactic at the end, which he ought to have been able to figure out if he'd taken time to do it. I think this was I think it was a 15-10 game, right? So he's got 11 minutes on the clock, plus 10 seconds for every move. So he should have taken time and noticed this. So look out for these patterns. Anytime you've got your important pieces in line with each other, you have to look out for threats that could take advantage of that alignment, right? So yeah, moving the developed pieces too many times, which costs him turns. It costs him development opportunities. He didn't develop this guy until his last move of the game, and it's too late by that point, right? This bishop could have been attacking, could have been defending, could have been blocking, all kinds of things. It never did it because he made too many other moves fiddling around on the board. And I think the other key thing to take away from this is whenever there's a threat, whenever you've got a piece under attack, you have to step back and go, okay, it's an attack, right? An attack is not necessarily a bad thing. Attacks can work in your favor. So, and you've got lots and lots of things that you could do. You could move the attacked piece, you could block the attack, you could capture the attacker, you can ignore the attack, you could launch a counter attack. There's lots of ways that you can respond to an attack, and you don't have to play automatically the first move that comes into your head. Okay, so those are some simple tips. If you're rated in the 1000, 1100 mark, then please take these on board, write them down if you need to, and take them into your future games. And I think you'll do better. I think you'll win more. I think you'll get over 1100, and hopefully that will be a good result. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed, and I'll see you soon.